Hello, everyone. Today we're going to sample the opening moves from a panel talk at Stony Brook University in New York, given on International Women's Day. Our speakers are the president of the university himself, and two college students who will be discussing the issues of gender equality. As usual, I know this will be educational for all of us. Let's begin.
Thank you so much for joining us for A Gender Lens, Evolving Equality in Education. I'm so glad you could be with us today, particularly, of course, on International Women's Day. So I think it's a very appropriate thing, and let's do it for that. And I hope what we're going to talk about really does fit with this year's theme of Be Bold for Change, hashtag Be Bold for Change. So I'm Sam Stanley. I have the privilege of serving as president of Stony Brook University in New York. I'll tell you a little bit more about Stony Brook in just a second. But I'm joined here today by two outstanding students from Stony Brook. They're skipping class just to be here, so I want you to know that, but we very much appreciate it.
Not that you're encouraging your students to duck out on their education or anything, Mr. President of the University.
And they're outstanding students who are very much engaged in the Stony Brook community and making a difference, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Bridget Foley, and I'm a senior at Stony Brook studying environmental humanities with a minor in writing and rhetoric.
Environmental humanities. Okay, what's that? The environmental humanities major, leading to a Bachelor's of Arts degree, draws together a range of disciplines to explore human understanding and interpretation of nature. So it's a glorified general studies degree? What exactly does its course requirements consist of? Intro to Cultural Anthropology, okay. Eco-aesthetics in Art, Moral Reasoning, Critical Analysis, Ecofeminism, Literature, and Film. Well, I see a chemistry option there, so maybe a bit of hard science, but yeah, okay. I was just curious. Let's continue.
I have considered myself a feminist and an artist since elementary school, but when I went to college, I've also added poet and writer to my repertoire.
Feminist, artist, writer, and poet. So, not focused on any STEM fields then. I wonder if she knows that, by the weight of her choices, she's contributing to the earnings gap.
At Stony Brook, I've been an orientation leader, president of our Quidditch team, and I'm also a member of our West African drumming ensemble called Volta, which comes from both the Volta region in Ghana that we study our music from, but also after the scientist who's very prominent in physics, and we're a big science school.
Did she say she was president of her Quidditch team? Okay. And a West African drumming ensemble. Man, there's that cultural appropriation I keep hearing about, rearing its ugly head.
And after I graduate, I'm planning on applying to the Peace Corps for Environmental Degradation Service. Thank you.
The Peace Corps can be a legitimately productive endeavor, so I wish her luck. Honestly.
All right, hi everyone. My name is Taisha Saintville, and I'm currently a graduate student at Stony Brook University pursuing my master's in public health. I also attended Stony Brook University for my undergraduate education, in which I received a bachelor's in women and gender studies with a specialization in gender sexuality in public health.
See, at first I thought, oh, a master's in public health is not necessarily awful. But then we know that whatever she ends up doing will be tempered with gender studies, with a specialization in gender sexuality in public health. Wonderful.
My interest in gender equity really stemmed from my personal experiences, and I've used that experience and passion and applied it through working with organizations such as Planned Parenthood, Advocates for Youth, and presently UN Women, He for She.
He for She. The movement that guilts men into seeing women as perpetual victims, inherently in need of their help. Got it.
And we're ranked among the top 100 universities in the nation and the top 50 public universities in the United States. And something we're particularly proud of is there's a recent study that came out from the Stanford Institute for Economic Policy Research.
Wait, did you say Stanford?
Which showed that a Stony Brook education ranks among the top 10 of all institutions around the country. So public, private, all institutions, taking all comers.
Yeah, well, I have several reasons to be suspicious of data being presented by Stanford University. But moving on.
So Eleanor Roosevelt said it really well. When it's better for everyone, it's better for everyone.
And when tautology is tautology, tautology is tautology.
The gender equality issues that we face on a daily basis on our campus could not be more important or timely. And some of the things we've asked are, what is the role of men in gender equality?
The role of men? Well, I don't know. Maybe men like Senator Aaron A. Sargent, who introduced the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, giving women the right to vote. Maybe men like Senator Birch Bayh, who co-authored Title IX of the 1972 Education Amendments.
How can they become involved in the prevention of violence against women? How do we combat sexual assault on campuses and gender-based violence?
Maybe men like Joe Biden, who drafted and helped to pass the Violence Against Women Act of 1994.
How do we promote healthy behaviors? The answer to these questions are fundamental to how we treat one another, how we work together to improve the human condition, and how we endeavor to achieve true equality.
So there's no questions to be had as to what role women have towards these goals? Men have to do all of the work and introspection. Well, that sounds about right. Hashtag he for she.
As the university president, these are things that I have to confront every day. But I have to say that achieving equality and gender equity is important to me personally. As a biomedical researcher, my wife was in exactly the same field. In fact, we graduated around the same time, except she had a doctoral degree as well, an MD, PhD. So both of us entered biomedical research. But as our careers progressed, I saw her face barriers that were put in front of her that I didn't face, among them being the first division chief, for example, in our division at Washington University in St. Louis. Added pressure, added barriers that were put in. Both of our daughters are now pursuing careers in medical school, and that's them there, Susan and Katie. I want their generation not to face the same kind of barriers that my wife did. We're not there yet. When Susan went on her first surgery rotation, one of the residents said, "Oh, by the way, do you bake?" We're really interested because the last medical student we had baked some really great brownies and cookies for us. Susan is an MD, PhD student. She has 6 first author publications. She's going to bring a lot more to the table at Johns Hopkins in that rotation than simply baking cookies.
So, of all the barriers and unfair difficulties your wife supposedly faced, the one you choose to give explicit details of is someone asking her if she bakes. Tell me, how did her being asked that question stifle her advancement in the medical field? Also, did she happen to take any time away from work in order to raise your 2 daughters?
So those prejudices still exist, and we really have to work hard to change them.
So I became committed to gender equity, honestly, when I first learned that it wasn't a thing in the world. It's always been preposterous to me that any kind of inequality could ever exist. But growing up at the turn of the 21st century, I've learned first and secondhand that far too much of it does exist.
I am hoping you mean in general terms globally, because in the West, in the country in which you live, women have equal rights under the law. So I am dying to know what you think you're lacking in the way of equity, i.e. justice.
When we talk about gender equality, we're also talking about racial, cultural, LGBT, class equality, because every single identity converges when it comes to being harmed by gender inequality.
Race is not a gender. Culture is not a gender. Being a lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender person are not genders. Class is not a gender. So when you say, when we talk about gender equality, You are speaking only for yourselves and your convoluted, nonsensically intersectional definition of the term.
So as a woman who went off to college as a self-taught feminist and afraid of the 1 in 4 rape statistic.
The 1 in 4 rape statistic. Okay, let me make way for someone far better versed on the subject to explain that one.
Next myth. 1 in 5 college women will be sexually assaulted. Now, this incendiary figure is everywhere in the media today. The 1 in 5 figure is based on a survey called the Campus Sexual Assault Study. But 2 prominent criminologists have noted fatal flaws. It had a very low response rate, a non-representative sample of respondents, and an overly broad definition of what counts as assault. I mean, it included such things as attempted forced kissing or intimate encounters while intoxicated. Now, defenders of the 1 in 5 figure will reply that the finding has been replicated by other studies, but these studies suffer from the same sorts of flaws. Now, the best study that we have on sexual assault on campus suggests the figures are closer to 1 in 40, not 1 in 4. 1 in 40 is still bad, but apparently not bad enough for the activists.
I'm naturally for gender equality, but the weight of serious commitment to it, I find, is a lot larger than just that. Sending the conversation on gender equality, I think, into hyperdrive can form a foundation for an overall more equitable society. And as we're forced to reckon with questions and situations of incredible divisiveness in our present and the coming future, I don't think we can afford not to have education stand as a gender advocate. Thank you.
That was a lot of words. Yes, a lot of words, signifying nothing.
So it's personal for me as well. As a woman of color, I possess multiple identities that render me invisible or other in society.
As a woman of color, you have multiple identities that render you invisible in society.
I'm invisible! Can you see me?
Yes.
Wow.
Maybe you should put some shorts on or something if you want to keep fighting evil today.
Why are you on that stage, then? How is it that you were allowed to pursue a master's degree in the first place? How did you become, president of the Sigma Iota Sigma sorority? I am honestly curious.
And being a woman is one of those identities that have exposed me to discrimination and social ridicule.
Discrimination and social ridicule. Did any of this discrimination and ridicule come from other women at all?
I remember when I was about 8 years old, in an effort to keep me out of trouble and keep me busy, my mom found a local baseball team for me to join. And I remember when I joined that day, all the boys were kind of having chatter and laughing because I was the only girl on the team. It was as if this impossible phenomena just occurred.
When you were 8 and the only girl on an all-boys team, 8-year-old boys laughed and made fun of you for being a girl.
I'm shocked to find that gambling is going on in here.
You're winning, sir.
Oh, thank you very much.
And that summer as well, I was given the position of left field because that was the easiest thing to do. That coach didn't even try to teach me. He just automatically assumed that I wasn't capable of doing other positions as my other teammates. And I remember that being a girl never ever felt so condemning. Being a girl felt like a consequence.
All right, assuming this story is true, how did the giggling 8-year-olds and an apathetic coach prevent you from pursuing a master's degree in college? Oh, wait, that's right, they didn't.
In addition to that, I grew up in a household with 2 older brothers and being told to cook for them, to clean for them, because you're the girl. And it was not long until I realized how my gender identity was being used to justify mistreatment and unfairness.
So you're saying you come from an abusive, sexist household with misogynistic parents?
And at the tender age of 13, I began to identify as a feminist and would advocate for women and gender equality in the years to come. And this is also personal for me because I have 4 nieces that mean the world to me, and it's important to me that their future is not negatively impacted by their gender identity.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
So for undergraduates, the main difficulty in becoming gender advocates is it primarily lies in learning how to effectively talk about it, first of all. At Stony Brook, for instance, we have a wonderfully diverse student body, but that entails a diverse understanding of gender inequity. And everywhere, undergraduates need to learn how to work effectively and genuinely with all those different levels of understanding.
They need to learn to be genuine. So, without gender advocacy, people are naturally disingenuous? Okay.
For one person, that means, convincing a feminist, someone who identifies as a feminist, to get up off the couch and do some meaningful work. But for another, it's a matter of helping them come to understand that nuanced instances of sexism actually do exist in everyday life.
Nuanced instances of sexism. Is that a fancier way of saying microaggressions?
Helping undergraduates to learn that the goal of being a gender advocate is starting a conversation to just bring about the slightest change in perspective rather than a massive mindset overhaul.
Translation. Make accusatory statements in order to guilt people into coming around to your way of thinking. Because it's really a question of whether they want to be genuine or not. Got it.
That is absolutely huge, and it takes developing critical skills like humility and honest respect to get there. And it's not easy, but I find that it's the foundation to actually get to effective change in your grassroots community.
If you're at the point in life where you're forming a grassroots community and you lack the skills, I would rather say principles, of humility and honesty, which you first need to develop, I think you might have other problems, primarily in your true motivations for forming a community in the first place.
And on the graduate side of things, one of the challenges faced was bridging the gap between the older generation and the younger generation. As a graduate assistant at the faculty center at my university.
Wait, you were a graduate assistant at your university? Well, how did you manage to convince them that you existed? I mean, being invisible and all.
I was tasked with the job of drafting a faculty toolkit for gender inclusion and diversity. And in drafting the toolkit, my main challenge was figuring out how to relay this information about the importance of gender inclusivity and the complexity of the topic without it going over the head of faculty.
Translation. My perspective on this subject was so advanced that not even members of the university faculty had the intelligence necessary to decipher my insight. So I had to find a way to dumb it down in order for them to be able to understand it.
Many find this topic complicated and thus are reluctant to engage in conversation around this topic.
Gosh, why would anyone be reluctant to engage in a conversation about this topic? You've only laid the accusation of wrongdoing at men's feet, who are, obviously, inherently abusive and discriminatory towards women. You've only implied that anyone not focusing on the topics you've determined as important are being disingenuous. I can't imagine why having such a discussion with you would be so unattractive. All right, everyone, that's about all I can handle of that. But rest assured, or rest concerned, given how many examples of questionable education I have been coming across lately, we'll be back to class before you know it. As always, thank you for watching.